You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Yandick. Featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me. Today, in a few hours from now, a bout between Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. will take place. It's an exhibition boxing fight that the entire community in the sport are talking about. Here today, featured columnist Jay Bilstein will tell us his thoughts on the upcoming bout later today. Jay, as always, it's great to have you on CYInterview.
Hey, Chris. Glad to be here with you this morning.
Well, thanks so much. So just to begin, I'd like for you to basically set the perspective for us on this one. Do you think that the United States of America just yearns for the days of nostalgia of the 1990s, maybe the early 2000s, where these gentlemen were fighting, and we are just looking back on a time that we enjoy more so, and that's why these nostalgialistic exhibition fights are something that people are paying attention to in 2020?
I think nostalgia is certainly part of it. However, I think that people in general become very attuned to names they know, whether that's in boxing, whether it's in politics, whether it's in acting. I mean, think about the movies. How many times do we have leading men or leading women who are names we have known for not simply years, but for decades, or in certain cases, my God, think about Clint Eastwood. How long has Clint Eastwood been around? He's been around more than half a century, more than that. So I think a lot of times it's the comfort of the name we know, it's the repetition of the name we know, and I think that's a big part of it. But if I could, I want to give a little historic perspective here. What is taking place between Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. is not new. We've had these kind of, I'll call them novelty fights, over the course of history. I believe back in 1970, there was what was billed as a computerized fight between Rocky Marciano, who had retired undefeated. I believe he had 39 wins. He was heavyweight champion of the world, against Muhammad Ali. Now, this was in 1970. If my memory serves, Muhammad Ali at the time was not fighting because he had been a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War, and he was stripped of his title and so forth. And as the story goes, he, was hard-pressed for money because he wasn't fighting, and he got offered some sum to do this quote-unquote computerized fight with Rocky Marciano. Marciano had supposedly lost something like 50 pounds to get on camera with Ali, even wore a toupee to make himself more camera-ready. I want to say at the time Marciano was around 45 years old, and Ali was, considerably younger. I want to say Ali was probably around 30 years old or so. And what they did is they shot themselves sparring again and again and again and again and again. So they would get in the ring, there was a referee, and they would spar. And then what would happen was supposedly a computer was then from all these different kind of cuts of film of sparring was going to predict an outcome. And I believe that depending on where you watch the fight, really had to do with who you saw as the winner. In the United States, for the American market, since you brought up the United States and nostalgia, for the American market, it was Rocky Marciano who I believe was declared the winner. However, in the European market, for the people who saw this fight, back in the day, people would go to theaters to see these type of one-off events. It was Muhammad Ali, formerly had been Cassius Clay, of course. He won the event in Europe. And so we had that. Now, you'll know this because you've had a prolific and storied career as a professional wrestling journalist. I don't know how many people who listen to CYInterview and who are our newer readers, and, newer, we could say, in the last 10 years, how many know your very, very extensive background in professional wrestling? Well, you're probably familiar with the name of Antonio Inoki, who had a boxer versus wrestler match. I think that was in 1975. I believe it was the same year when Chuck Wepner fought Andre the Giant. I know you'll be able to talk more about that. That was a kind of novelty act, a novelty fight. And then let's fast forward. Wasn't it just, I want to say 3 years ago, that we had on a real tremendous collection. I think we called it the League of Extraordinary Fight Commentators, who talked about Conor McGregor and at that time the pending fight with Floyd Mayweather Jr. And at the time, one of the people was with us, rest in peace, was former professional wrestler, Golden Age bodybuilder, Rick Drayson. We had on Dan Severn. We had on Bobby Rooney. Dan Severn, of course, one of the great early fighters of the UFC, tremendous wrestler. We had on Bobby Rooney, professional boxer and boxing trainer. We had on Gary Stretch, former professional boxer. We had on Scott McGimsey, former amateur boxer and boxing aficionado. And, of course, you with your tremendous background as a wrestling journalist. And I was on, and we talked about that. So here I've just given 3 instances, right? We've got the computerized fight, Marciano and Ali. We've got the Inoki kind of wrestling boxer matchup, and then we had 3 years ago Conor McGregor coming out of the UFC to fight Floyd Mayweather Jr., who to this day is undefeated and is retired. To me, these are specialty or novelty fights. As I understand, the fight between Tyson and Jones is going to be an 8-round affair, 2-minute rounds. There's going to be no judging. There's going to be no winner, they say, declared. I don't even know what to call it, really. I'll call it people like to see spectacle, and I hope they get their money's worth for $50, but I don't think we can take this seriously as a true boxing matchup.
Have you thought about, in 2020, what this truly means that people would want to watch something where there's not a declared winner?
Everybody loves the circus, or at least a lot of people love the circus. I know a lot of people are opposed to having animals in the circus. I think we could have great circuses without animals, and certainly more humane. But everybody loves, unless you're a little kid, everybody loves to see clowns and jugglers and high wire acts and trapeze and so forth. We like entertainment. We haven't really evolved that much from the days of ancient Rome and gladiators and spectacle. And we like to see spectacle. And, there was an expression in Latin going back to Rome, pan e circenses, blood and circus. Not blood. Bread and circus. I had a Freudian slip there. Maybe tonight we will unfortunately have blood and circus. But bread and circus, people like to be entertained, and they like to fill their stomachs with what they perceive to be delicious-tasting morsels of food. And isn't this what we have, every Sunday on the weekend in the United States of America? Saturdays we watch the spectacle of college football. Sundays we watch the spectacle of professional football. We're largely passive, right? It's not like we're out there playing the sport. We're sitting, holding our remote control in our hand, flicking channels, looking at a big screen TV in many cases, and filling our stomachs with nachos or pizza or what have you. And that's just modern-day bread and circus, and this is just bread and circus. And this is going to be a big circus because it's 2 very big names, but let's face facts. We've got 2 men in their 50s. Mike Tyson hasn't fought in, 15 years? Roy Jones Jr. has been knocked out a few times, if I recall. This is just spectacle. I don't take this seriously in terms of a pugilistic matchup. But just like professional wrestling, when people used to say, "Oh, professional wrestling's fake," there's nothing fake about professional wrestling. Is it choreographed? Loosely? Yeah. Are winners predetermined in a storyline? Yes. Would you like to get in the ring and tangle with one of these professional wrestlers, somebody like Haku? Tonga comes to mind? Heck no. So fake? No. Does it take a lot of training? Yes. Is it physically extremely taxing? Yes. Are these men extremely dangerous human beings? Yes, they are. But is this a true boxing matchup? Not that I can see.
Featured columnist Jay Bilstein giving us his insight on the Mike Tyson-Roy Jones Jr. exhibition bout today. Jay, thanks so much for being with us on CY Interview today.
Great always to be here with you, Chris.